Governor Dan Patrick of Texas last year asked the Harris County prosecutor to open the criminal investigation into Planned Parenthood. You remember all the videos that came out, and we were talking about those a lot about a year ago. A grand jury in Houston that was investigating accusations of misconduct against Planned Parenthood has instead indicted two abortion opponents who made undercover videos of the organization. One was the president of the Center for Medical Progress. The leader, his name's David R. I believe you say Adaliadin. He's 27. He's the director of the center. He had posed as a biotech representative to infiltrate Planned Parenthood affiliates and surreptitiously record his efforts to procure tissue for research. Another center employee, Sandra S. Merritt, 62, was indicted on a felony charge of tampering with a governmental record. And the record tampering charges accused Mr. Daladin and Ms. Merritt of making and presenting fake California driver's licenses with the intent to defraud for their April meeting at Planned Parenthood in Houston. Many people saw those videos, and it revealed that the videos, they say, revealed that Planned Parenthood was engaged in the illegal sale of body parts, a charge that the organization had denied and has denied, and that has not been supported in numerous congressional and state investigations triggered by the release of the video so far. On Monday, yesterday, Harris County DA Devon Anderson said in a statement that grand jurors had cleared Planned Parenthood of any wrongdoing. She declined to provide details about the case against Mr. Daladin and Ms. Merritt, including any documents or evidence presented to the grand jury, citing state law on the secrecy of grand jury proceedings. So what's going on with this case right now? We turned this morning to a criminal defense lawyer. He is Chris Lewis from down in the Texas area, and he joins us here on the Gary Sutton Show. Chris, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gary.
Chris, talk to me a little bit more about this case and what's going on here exactly. So does Planned Parenthood now get to walk away from this? We saw the public outrage last year on the body parts and so forth, even to the point of having town halls nationally on TV. So what are we seeing here?
Well, your question, does Planned Parenthood get to walk away? Yeah, I think from a criminal liability standpoint, at least as far as this case is concerned, and this case involved Planned Parenthood, I think Gulf Coast, which owns this particular facility that we're talking about, and some in Louisiana. So the investigation, it was a grand jury investigation. Grand juries can conduct their own investigations, and I think in this particular situation they did with the help of other law enforcement. And what they found was that Planned Parenthood was not doing that. They weren't selling body parts for a profit. So yes, I think they get to walk away from the criminal liability of it. But this is a very interesting case from the standpoint of you've got the convergence of potential criminal responsibility and also political ramifications associated with Planned Parenthood and the selling of fetal tissue. Talk
a little bit about the two people now that have been indicted at this particular point, this Daladin and Merritt. What their roles were here from a legal standpoint.
Well, as if you've looked at it, as we know, they are anti-abortion activists, and what they were trying to do, Planned Parenthood, at least in whole or in part, is funded by the federal government. Their attempt was to get Planned Parenthood defunded. You get them defunded, you essentially you cut them off, and you cause them to have to shut down. One of the ways to do it is to have this public outrage. Hey, these people are being irresponsible with fetal tissue. They're selling it, and they're not only selling it, but they're selling it for a profit. And that's what they were trying to expose. It apparently, at least at this location, wasn't happening, so they tried to manufacture some of the evidence. So, I hand it to the Harris County District Attorney's Office, because you have a district attorney, Devin Anderson, who was appointed by Rick Perry.
Right.
She is a Republican. She was then retained in office by the voters again. This appears to be a very nonpartisan investigation where the grand jury is told, this is what the allegations are. You go figure out if a crime has been committed. And these two individuals, the grand jury determined that, what they did was they were actually buying some of this tissue from Planned Parenthood or from other locations when it's illegal to do so. And not only that, but they were misrepresenting who they were, and in doing so, they were using either falsified or fictitious documentation from another state. And that's the most serious charge. I'm reading a press release right now from the Harris County District Attorney's Office, and it appears that both of them have been indicted for that more serious charge, the second-degree felony of tampering with a governmental record.
This goes beyond a sting kind of thing, then, doesn't it? It goes into another area. The stings, you kind of misrepresent yourself to send somebody up. I remember the Acorn things, the Acorn cases. We had some of that going on. So, what's the difference between a sting and what happened here?
Well, first of all, with a sting, a lot of times we hear the term sting being used by law enforcement to misrepresent who they are in order to gain trust and really see the inside workings of whatever organization that they're trying to infiltrate. The problem with this is this wasn't law enforcement doing this, and the people that were conducting this sting did not have clean hands. So essentially the tide turned on them, and in the course of, I think the investigation went on for a couple of months, but it was a lengthy investigation, and what they determined was, David and Sandra did not go into this with unclean hands. They actually committed crimes in order to procure the evidence that they were trying to get, that they thought existed. And the law just doesn't allow you to break the law, especially law enforcement sometimes breaks the law in the course of a sting operation, but it doesn't allow you to break the law in order to procure that information. So no matter how valiant your efforts are or politically expedient your efforts are, if you're doing something illegal in order to try to induce someone else to do something illegal, then you should have to answer for those illegal actions.
Right. So, in other words, you're trying to get someone to do something illegal that they might not have been doing prior to that, and now sets up another facet to this that we haven't thought about. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Sure.
Yeah. Greg Abbott is your governor there. He's a Republican in the state of Texas. He said on Monday that the Inspector General of the state's Health and Human Services Commission and the Texas Attorney General's office have been investigating Planned Parenthood's action. And he said this, in a quote, "Nothing about today's announcement in Harris County impacts the state's ongoing investigation." He went on to say, "The state of Texas will continue to protect life, and I will continue to support legislation prohibiting the sale or transfer of fetal tissue." The state attorney general, Ken Paxton, said in a statement, "The fact remains that the videos expose the horrific nature of abortion and the shameful disregard for human life of the abortion industry. The state's investigation of Planned Parenthood is ongoing," unquote. React to that, if you will. I don't want to say it sounds like sour grapes, but are they saying basically, okay, we're still looking at some pretty horrific videos out there, and no matter how they were procured, we understand, what happened here with the two people in question, but there's still we're still investigating Planned Parenthood. What are they investigating for then at this particular point?
Well, I think it is a little bit of sour grapes. I also think that it's a lot of political rhetoric. So, if you go county by county in the state of Texas, you'll find, some counties that are red, some counties that are blue. But when you're talking about statewide elections, and you're talking about the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, statewide election, you're talking about Greg Abbott, statewide election. Our statewide elections are all Republican. There's not a Democrat that's winning a statewide election in the state of Texas. So what you're hearing from them is political rhetoric, and essentially I think as it's broken down, what they're saying is the decision by the grand jury to indict these individuals and to find no legal culpability on the part of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast does nothing to detract us from what our political agenda or our political perspective is, and that is that we are pro-life, that we believe in the right to life. We believe that abortion should be illegal, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that Planned Parenthood is not breaking the law. But I think that what they're also saying is there's the undertone of we are very forthright in our belief, and our belief is that abortion should be illegal.
I was reading again that it was in federal court in San Francisco. Planned Parenthood sued this center, the Center for Medical Progress, which I guess set up this fake company called Biomax Procurement Services, creating false identities and claiming to be part of a legitimate provider of fetal tissue to researchers. And so we look at this right now, and they say, and Planned Parenthood said, as the dust settles and the truth comes out, it's becoming totally clear that the only people who engaged in wrongdoing are the criminals behind this fraud, and we're glad that they're being held accountable. So it looks like the two people that were involved in this are being held accountable now. And do we go back here? Eric Ferraro is the spokesperson for Planned Parenthood. Is it totally clear that the only people engaged in wrongdoing were these two people, or is there something more to it that has yet to be settled?
I think there's probably more to it. That would be a little bit naive of us to think that only these two people were involved in the fraud. I mean, there is an objective, and this topic is an absolute lightning rod, and there are very strong opinions on both sides, pro-life, pro-choice. So to think that those are the only two involved, I think is a little bit naive. But I also don't think the only reason they came on the radar is because they, along with our lieutenant governor, specifically asked for the Harris County grand jury to get involved, for law enforcement to get involved, and hand it to law enforcement. They did their job. So rather than having this confirmation bias, Planned Parenthood did something wrong, we're gonna find evidence that essentially leads us to that conclusion. They went in with an open mind. Let's see if anyone did anything wrong, and they came to the answer that only two people did something wrong, and it's them. Now, here's the bigger thing. Is there going to be any responsibility, any criminal responsibility that they're going to have to face? Because if this case ever goes to trial, this is a perfect case that sets up for jury nullification, because the case is going to be much less about the facts and a lot more about some referendum on abortion. And so you're going to have jurors. You'd have 12 jurors in a case like that would have to decide whether or not, based upon the facts presented, they violated the law. But to actually find a jury of 12 people that can just focus on those issues and not make this a political referendum, that's going to be the real challenge.
You remember when this came out last year, and I mean the country was in a furor about this. I mean, everybody was. So what do we say to people now who were in a furor? I mean, we're talking about it on talk radio. Then I can remember it very well, and a lot of people assumed that Planned Parenthood was absolutely wrong. We've had people screaming and yelling about Congress not approving the money for Planned Parenthood. Now Congress comes back out and says, we're looking at pulling their funding for this kind of thing. So does Planned Parenthood walk away from this unscathed right now, or is Governor Abbott still on to something that we're going to, these were still films that showed some pretty gory stuff there, and there were some pretty gory things said. I mean, those parts weren't doctored, were they?
No, I think that part of the video, I think it's come out that part of the videos were doctored. I think that where we end up at the end of the day is the people who sided on the side of the right to life and right to life activists are going to stay right there, and the people that are pro-choice and have sided on that side will continue to be on that side, and both sides will continue to point fingers. I don't think that anything related to these two individuals being indicted for this. I think there's a lot of anti-abortion activists that think that their actions, although criminal, are completely justified in part of the greater good. I think there's going to be a lot of justification here.
And so what's the moral to the story there? In other words, when you're going to go out and you're going to pull off this kind of sting. I remember a guy did that a few years ago on the Acorn thing, and Acorn went after him. And tried to do the same thing to him. When you go out and you cause damage to a reputation here, and maybe what you're saying is happening isn't happening. Now you could say, well, we disagree with abortion, we disagree with baby parts being used, all that kind of stuff. The films were gory, all that's true, but when you did it and what you said was happening wasn't happening, it sounds like an apology's owed to Planned Parenthood right now. Am I wrong?
Well, it does, and I think the moral of the story is let's not cast stones if we live in glass houses.
Yeah.
And what they did is they might have really believed this was going on, and it might be going on at other locations. I don't know. I have no way to know this.
Sure.
It wasn't going on at this particular location. So whether an apology is needed or not, I don't know. I don't think they're going to get an apology, but there is going to be some accountability.
Right. Accountability. And again, I think you just made a great point there. In this particular location, in this particular place, that was not going on. Remains to be seen if it was going on elsewhere, but for this particular situation, it was wrong what was done, and it was not being done here in this Planned Parenthood, and they had every right to sue and or not sue, but bring these people to justice, and apparently that's what's going to happen. Again, don't be so radical in your views that you're willing to go out and cheat to get the final thing that you want as far as the result, right?
Absolutely. I think that's well said.
Chris, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks for the insights on this. I always look forward to talking to you, and we'll do it again sometime.
I appreciate it, Gary.
Thank you very much. Take care. Chris Lewis with us on the Gary Sutton Show, a defense a criminal attorney. And you know what? There you go.